Okay, so I am going to talk about the two wars the United States directly got involved in during the Cold War. So I'm going to finish off the PowerPoint that I didn't finish off last time. So if you open up that Cold War PowerPoint and go to down to slide 51, the North Korea slide, or the Korean War slides. I'm going to finish off that presentation. Then you guys are going to pause the video, open up the Vietnam War presentation I've already posted, and then I'm going to continue on for there. So I'll give you guys a second to be able to switch between the two or pause the video or whatever, and we're going to talk about those two wars. So on slide 51, in 1950, North Korea, which you're looking at this map on top in orange, decides to try to unify all of Korea, and they're going to, using Soviet weapons and supplies given to them by the Soviet Union, they're going to invade South Korea and they're going to unify that whole peninsula. Well, the North Korean army is almost successful in doing so. If you look at the next picture of Korea, all that's left of South Korea in September of 1950 is that little patch of green where the UN troops are kind of keeping them safe in Busan. And so the South Koreans freak out and they cry out to the United States. They appeal to us and they're like, look, you guys said you wanted to contain communism, right? Come help us. Look at what's going on. Help. And the United States sends troops, our own. We don't just send supplies. We send our own people into Korea. And they're led by General MacArthur, who was in charge of the fighting in the Pacific Theater. And thanks to his knowledge of the terrain and fighting in these types of climates and jungles, we not only are able to push the North Koreans back to that 38th parallel line that used to exist, we push them almost all the way up to the border of China. And it looks like we are going to unify Korea and make the whole peninsula a democratic country. But the Chinese freak out when we're at their border, and the Chinese are like, nah, y'all got to go. And so the Chinese send troops to help the North Koreans, and what happens is we end up getting pushed right back to where we started at the 38th parallel. So after 3 years of fighting, nothing was gained, nothing was lost either. So we see this as a victory again for democracy, because we're able to keep communism where it is. Now, the reason that North Korea and the United States have issues is because some of the tactics that we were using were very questionable. The Koreans accused us, and rightly so, of using these chemicals to clear out jungles so we could fight them better. We did the same thing in Vietnam too. Also by killing innocent women, babies, kids, in villages that we came to, and being just absolutely brutal to the North Koreans. And so that's where that animosity comes in today, is the way in which we fought this war against the North Koreans. And that's why we don't really see eye to eye. So on slide 52, if you're taking notes, you need to write what's in that green box right there at the very bottom. After 3 years of fighting, a ceasefire was agreed to in 1953. Not a peace treaty, not a surrender, a ceasefire. All that happened is everyone laid down their weapons and said, all right, we're not going to shoot each other anymore, but we ain't going to agree on nothing either. And they built a wall along the 38th parallel, which is still there today, which is still heavily guarded. And that is the boundary between North and South Korea. If you have a chance to look at a video at YouTube, if you just type in the 38th parallel, you can see the wall that's built. And there are, on one side of the wall, because it's a big wall. On one side of the wall, there's American and South Korean guards. And on the other side of the wall, there's North Korean guards. And all they do is stare at each other all day long, making sure no one makes a move. And then when their shift is up, they tap out, yo, what's up, bro? And then new guards come, and all they do is stare at each other. And no one makes a move to make sure no one's going to start another war. It's super intense. My husband worked up there. And we find the biggest, baddest dudes to work on this wall, because Koreans are typically smaller than us. So we'll find like the 6'4", 6'5" soldier just to stare at them. And the North Koreans are just staring right back. It's intense. All right. So the USA stopped the spread of communism in South Korea, but Vietnam is going to be a big problem for us. And So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap up this PowerPoint from 1945 to 1945, or 1945, excuse me, to 1949. The United States successfully contained communism in Europe. We were not successful in containing it in Asia. And eventually it spreads. If you look at the map on slide 54, every country you see in purple falls to communism. The green countries would be your democratic countries that we support and we help try to maintain their democratic governments when they feel threatened. So the Cold War intensifies thanks to the Soviet Union's getting nuclear weapons as well. There's espionage going on. They're spying on us. We're spying on them. It's intense. And the wars are going to break out. We've already just talked about the Korean War. Now we're going to switch. If you want to go ahead and open up the other PowerPoint, we're going to talk about the Vietnam War today. Pretty in depth. All right. So the essential question we're going to answer today for the Vietnam War: what were the causes and consequences of America's involvement in the Vietnam War? Because this war, you're going to see. All right. So the Vietnam War, I'm on slide 2. The United States was effective in limiting communism in Europe, like I just said. But communism was spreading fast in Asia. From 1950 to 1973, we directly get involved in the Vietnam War. It is the longest war we've ever been in. If you can do math, which some of you cannot, I'll do it for you. 23 years. And it's a very, very, very controversial war. If you know anyone that's fought in this war, or maybe you've got a grandparent or a great uncle or something like that, if they're willing to talk about it, you should ask them about their experience. Some men definitely struggle from PTSD, and if that's the case, please don't open up that box. But if they're willing to talk about it, please talk about it with them. It's sad. So remember way back last semester when I talked about big, strong countries ruling over weaker ones for their resources, colonialism. In 1887, France came to Vietnam and controlled that country for its natural resources, its ports. If you look on this map right here, I'm on slide 3. Vietnam is right there on the coast, and it gives great access to those other countries in the Pacific Ocean. So in 1945, after World War II is over, Ho Chi Minh is going to lead a war for independence against the French. They don't want them there anymore. And they're going to be successful in getting rid of the French. The problem isn't that that Ho Chi Minh wanted independence for Vietnam. The problem is he's a communist as well. That's where the issues occur. So as Truman and Eisenhower feared, the domino theory was happening. We were watching communism bleed out of the Soviet Union into Asia, into all these countries. So we actually just tried to send aid to the French, but the French were not successful in defeating the Vietnamese. And so we realized we have to send our own people to do it. So Ho Chi Minh gained control of a lot of North Vietnam. And now he's looking at South Vietnam as well to do what the North Koreans were trying to do, and connect the country and unify it under one single government. They don't want to be split. So I'm on slide 5 right now. If you're taking notes by hand, you need to write everything that's on slide 5. It's not a lot. These words are really big for this PowerPoint. Ho Chi Minh's communist supporters in the north are called the Viet Minh. And in South Vietnam, communists are called Viet Cong. So you're going to hear a lot, because I'm going to have you guys watch a video on the Vietnam War, a really interesting one. So when the U.S. troops refer to the Vietnamese soldiers, they often call them Viet Congs. That's who we're fighting in South Korea, are the Viet Congs, these communists. And unfortunately, in 1963, in the middle of this war, JFK is assassinated, and we're going to talk about him and his presidency later. So after JFK's death, his vice president comes in charge. That's Lyndon B. Johnson, and it's his responsibility to deal with Vietnam. And he's going to have some questionable, very, very questionable methods of doing so. All right. So in slide 7, and if you're taking notes, you need to write all of slide 7. The North Vietnamese attack the USS Maddox, this ship off the coast of Vietnam, in this Gulf that you're looking right here in the map called the Gulf of Tonkin. Congress responded by giving Lyndon Johnson, the president, broad powers to defend Vietnam at any cost. They went to the president and said, they directly attacked our ship. You can do whatever you want, sir. Whatever you want to defend South Vietnam and keep it from falling to communism. And Lyndon B. Johnson, being from Texas, like, all right, boys, I like what I hear. Let's get some troops together. Let's get down to Vietnam. Ooh, my Texas is good. So, in an effort to spread the contagion of communism and because of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, Lyndon B. Johnson sends troops to Vietnam in 1965. So we go from just sending supplies to 1965, we're there live and live in color. And by 1968, because we are not doing well at all, over 500,000 soldiers are fighting in Vietnam. 500,000 men are in this country. And it's not going well for us at all. The goal, I'm now on slide 9, and if you're writing notes, you need to write all of this because this will be a question on your open note quiz. The goal of the U.S. military is to defeat the Viet Cong and support the democracy we put into the democracy that was in place in South Vietnam. But here's the problem. The way that the Viet Cong fight is difficult because when you're fighting, you guys live right near Leavenworth, the base, the Fort Leavenworth. It's easy to spot a soldier. Why? He's wearing a uniform. He has a certain look. His face is shaved. He is in uniform. That's how you know it's a soldier. The Viet Cong don't do that. They dress like everyday Vietnamese people, and they hide weapons on their persons, and they'll just come out and attack you. So you could be walking in a village trying to get food, and they'll just come out, shoot, and then run away. And you can't find it because they're dressed like everyone else is dressed. And so you don't know who the enemy is and who your friend is. And so this creates just constant paranoia for the American troops because everywhere they go, they don't know if these are the good or the bad guys. They all look the same. They use guerrilla tactics. That's hit and run. They know they cannot beat the United States Army face to face. So we're going to hit and run. We're going to attack you super fast, and then we're going to run back into the jungles. And the jungles, God help us, are super thick. The climate is hot. Oh, there's bugs everywhere. The jungles made it super difficult to fight these people. Yikes. All right. So on slide 10, there's just a picture. And you see what's going on in this picture is American troops. Some guys are lowering their friend down into a hole, and you're like, why is he going in a hole? Like what? Because what the Vietnamese did was they went underground to fight the Viet Cong. Excuse me, let me specify. They literally dug tunnel systems, and they would sleep in there, eat in there. They would pop up from these holes in the ground, attack us, and then run back into these tunnels. And a lot of the times, they would booby trap the tunnels. And the only way, it was like trying to get ants out of an anthill. We would send troops down to try to go find these Viet Cong and kill them, but then we'd run into booby traps, or we'd get lost in these tunnel systems, or by the time we got there, they'd already be gone. And so, look, I'm a little claustrophobic. I ain't the one going down. I'm gonna let you, good job, G.I. Joe, good luck, take a flashlight. I ain't going down. You gonna have to send me home. That ain't happening here. We use a lot of different tactics that are not good to fight. We bomb. I'm on slide 11, by the way. We bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So if you look on this map right here, this red line is the trail the Viet Cong would use to supply their fighters, bring them food, guns, weapons, all of that stuff while they're fighting us. Now, you need to pay attention. Notice they're actually going into Cambodia. And then, so they're going out of North Vietnam through Cambodia back into South Vietnam to deliver supplies because they know the United States, well, they think the United States isn't going to bomb a country that's not at war with them. They're like, we'll go through Cambodia, and that way the United States can't touch our supply train. Well, we break our rule, and we're like, no, we're going to bomb your supply train, bud. And so we start bombing Cambodia and Laos, which have nothing to do with the war. So we're tearing up these cities trying to stop the supply chain of the Viet Cong. to try to clear the jungles that are super dense. If you look at those pictures, we use napalm and pesticides, also known as Agent Orange, if you've ever heard of it. And these things are super cancerous. I used to, if we were in class together, I'd show you a different presentation, and it shows you like kids with the birth defects because their, parents were exposed to these pesticides that we were using to try to clear out the jungle. Not good. Sorry, it's exhausting talking to you people for so long and not getting any feedback. All right. Soldiers are sent on these search and destroy missions. Basically, they send like 10 guys into the jungle, be like, all right, see if you can find anybody tonight. And these jungles are laced with landmines that the Viet Cong have placed out. And so you would be walking as carefully as you can, and all of a sudden you'd hear a click, and you knew it was game over for you. Boom. If you've ever seen Forrest Gump, when him and Bubba go off to war, they're fighting in the Vietnam War. And so remember when they're trailing, like, get down, and they all get in the grass? That's a search and destroy mission. And these things were very rarely successful, and we lost a lot of good men doing this. Okay. Slide 14. If you're writing notes, you need to write everything on this slide. I know some stuff is covered up by pictures and whatnot. I'm not going to quiz you over what you can't see. I'm just quizzing you over what you can if you're taking notes. The My Lai Massacre in 1968. Our soldiers go to this town filled with innocent women, children, and men, older men, and under orders, they kill everyone. And this is called the My Lai Massacre. And unlike previous wars, this is what you need to write or put a star by. Everyone in America has TVs now. TV is a thing. Radio, everyone has a radio, but everyone also has a TV, which means there's cameras and news crews in Vietnam reporting exactly what's happening, which means the American people are seeing what the American troops are doing, and they are not happy about it. We are seeing the atrocities. Troop morale is at an all-time low. No one that is there wants to be there. Most of these men fighting, and I'll get to that in a second, were drafted, which means they did not volunteer for this war. They were forced into this war. And on top of all of this going on, we are not winning jack crap. In fact, what it looks like to most Americans is we are losing, and we're losing men at the same time. Okay. So even with the TVs there, the government comes out and keeps telling us everything's going good. So if you're writing notes, you need to write down that right there, the credibility gap. The government's telling us one thing. Hey, it's going great. Vietnam is under control. We're doing everything, and we're going to win this war. But what we're seeing on TV contradicts what they're telling us, and this creates a credibility gap. All of a sudden, we are beginning to suspect our government is not telling us the truth all the time. This did not exist before the Vietnam War because we were forced to believe the government. We couldn't see anything. If the government was saying we were beating the Nazis, well, I have to believe the government because I can't see for myself. We can see for ourselves now thanks to televisions. And we are seeing something vastly different from what the government is telling us. How freaking dare you? There's where all problems begin. In 1968, the Viet Cong launched a Tet Offensive. A very successful move that they did. And I'm on slide 16, by the way. And we see this attack on the news, and it's just further proof that we're not winning this war. And the Tet Offensive is considered the turning point of the Vietnam War. So I'm on slide 17 right now. If you're writing notes, you need to write everything on this slide. We, for the first time in American history, we do not support this war. And by we, I mean the American public. And we become very vocal about why we don't like this war. We begin to protest, and an anti-war movement grows. And LBJ, seeing this happen, knows what he's done, knows what's going on for real in Vietnam, and knows that we're not going to win this war, announces that he is not going to run for re-election. That's how bad this war is going. A man decides to not even bother running again because he don't want to deal with it anymore. Good luck to the next guy. And the next guy, we'll get there. All right, so on slide 18, you can see a lot of people, younger people, protesting this war. And these protests became larger and became very violent, unfortunately. Students were the leaders at protesting this war. They're very educated. The hippie movement's going on. We're going to talk about that in another unit. And they know that the draft is unfair because the people being drafted are not rich white college kids, rich white young men. It is poor African American, Hispanic high school dropouts. That's who the government, it's like the undesirables of society. That's who the government's sending. And people realize this. This is a racial, discriminatory draft. And people know this. Muhammad Ali, the famous boxer, was drafted and he said, I'll sit in jail. I'm not going to fight. And they put him in jail until this war is over. This man lost some of the prime years of his fighting life because he refused to fight in this war because he was drafted. Now, in 1968, the election that LBJ decided not to run in happens. And because Democrats couldn't find a good candidate, the Republican Nixon is going to take advantage of this divided Democratic Party and he wins. So Richard Nixon, he's famous for this. He's going to become the next president. And Nixon promotes, we're going to have peace with honor in Vietnam. We're going to have peace with honor. We're going to work this out. It's going to be honorable. I'm going to have the men come home. That's what people want to hear. And he knows that. So Nixon and the National Security Advisor, Henry Kissinger, come up with a plan called Vietnamization. So if you were writing notes, I'm on slide 22, you need to write everything on this slide. Basically what he's saying with Vietnamization is, I'm going to slowly pull the troops out of Vietnam and train the Vietnamese soldiers that are trying to fight for democracy and let them deal with it themselves. This is their country. We don't need to be here anymore. Let the Vietnamese worry about the Vietnamese. In reality, he wants a knockout blow. He wants to win because it's going to make him and his administration look good. And he sends troops to Cambodia and Laos and bombs these countries because he thinks no one's going to find out back home. No, we found out. We found out really quickly. And it sets off one of the largest protests in American history. 250,000 people go out and just scream their anger at this war. And some of these protests turn violent. If you're writing notes, this purple box right here, at Kent State University, you need to write that. At Kent State University in 1970, the National Guard opens fire on these unarmed protesters and kills four students there. This is a disaster for Nixon, a disaster for the government, a disaster for everybody involved. You have killed innocent Americans on American soil because they're protesting. What are you doing? At this point, Nixon knows it's a wrap. Like, we're not going to win this war. We've been there for 23 years. So in 1973, the United States and North Vietnam agreed to a ceasefire. Yet again, not a peace treaty, not a surrender, a ceasefire. I'm going to stop shooting you. You're going to stop shooting me. And we take all of our men and we go back home. And by 1975, the North Vietnamese, who promised, okay, I'm glad you're going home, United States, we won't do anything bad while you're gone, broke that promise and invaded South Vietnam, and they unified it under a communist government. People are going to tell you different things about this war. They're going to say that it was we didn't lose. We lost this war. America has lost a war. We lost the Vietnam War. Our whole goal there was to stop the spread of communism. Not only did we not stop it, not only did we send a bunch of men there, not only did we do atrocious things while we were there and had a lot of good men killed, we lost at the end of the day. And that's why it's such a controversial. That's why it's such a controversial war, because of everything that we did and everything that happened. So, you need to write everything on the slide I just talked about, slide 24. If you're writing notes, everything needs to be written down. Conflict was the longest and most divisive in U.S. history. I've told you that. I'm on slide 27. The war changed how our foreign policy, how we deal with foreign countries. Containment ended. Containment's not working. It's spreading everywhere. And the United States becomes more cautious in our involvement in other countries' business because of this war. Congress limits the presidential powers. We realize just letting the president do what he wants with our military, thank God, is not a good idea. And so they passed the War Powers Act in 1973, which limits how long the president is allowed to have total control of the military, without the Congress stepping in and getting involved. So these days, I believe the president has like 90 days before Congress can step in and be like, no, we don't want to send troops anywhere. No, we don't want to do this. He's got 3 months before Congress will step in and be like, nope, the people don't want you here, so you're going to remove those troops. Thank God. I'm on slide 28. This is the last slide. If you're writing notes, you need to write all of these down. The war changed America at home. People began to lose faith in the government. For the first time in American history, we are not very trustful of our government. We are very wary of how it runs. And it's been that way ever since. In fact, it's obviously a lot worse today than ever was. We look at politicians as automatically crooked. And you got to prove that you're a good dude because we don't trust you. The war cost $176 billion. And back home, and we'll talk about this in a different unit, it led to inflation. And it weakened LBJ's Great Society. Lyndon B. Johnson was working on a war on poverty and trying to help impoverished communities and cities, and this weakened that. And we'll talk about that later. One good thing that happened is the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18. You used to have to be 21 to vote. It's down to 18. And I want you to think about for a second why it went down to 18. Okay, I'll tell you. Because you can be drafted into the military at 18. And people realize it's unfair that you can go fight and die for your country at 18, but you can't vote for the people in charge of you at 18. So we lowered the voting age to 18, and that's why it is where it is today. That's it. Don't worry about this closure activity. That's not for you to do. I'll have work posted over the Vietnam War so you guys can take a closer look. I'm kind of bummed, Jamie. I put on like this gorgeous lip gloss, but I was drinking water before I was doing this video and doing some other stuff, and it definitely wore off, and I'm disappointed in myself. All right, guys, stay safe, make good decisions. I'll see you next time next year. But you'll see me next time I do a lecture.